It looks like you can hear me, so it looks good. I think we're close.
We're good.
You just ran across the back of the screen.
I did. I needed a pen.
So, we all good? I'm talking to my no audio. So working on my end. It's working on my end. If you can hear me, just say yes in the chat box. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, say yes in the chat box. Charlene is typing. Thank you, Charlene. I appreciate it. So, okay, so it looks like it's working on this end that I can see my microphone going in and out. So we're doing our best. So, hi, everybody. My name is Phil Valentine, but for the grace of God, I have not had to consume alcohol or any other substances since December 28th, 1987. So in what, 10 days? Is today the 18th or the 19th?
Today's the 20th, sir.
No, it's the 19th.
Right? Is it?
I don't know what day it is. But like in less than 10 days, I'm going to have 31 years in recovery, provided everything goes well through the holiday season. So we are also here from the fabulous studio here on 75 Charter Oak Avenue in Hartford, Connecticut, bringing you this webinar live and in person. No, coach is an island. And these are really just my thoughts on the best way to deploy recovery coaches into the field. So here we go, and I'm going to ask for your participation. So this isn't one of those things where you can kind of just sit back and listen. Well, I guess you can, because I don't really have much control over that one way or another, do I? So let's get started. You guys ready? If you're ready, everyone nod your head, say yes out loud, knowing full well that I can't hear any of you. The only way that I can hear you or see you is what you type in the box, in the chat box. And I'll be reviewing that. So when I look down like this, I'm actually looking at the chat box. Charlene is ready. I think I'm ready, but I guess we'll find out. So, on December 2018, that's now. That is the current situation. And this is like a brainstorming session. So for those of you who are in the Recovery Coach Academy or have taken things like this is a wide open brainstorm. Where are you seeing recovery coaches being hired? Where are recovery coaches hired? And this is where I want to see everybody start typing. So you got to start putting in your answers here. This is audience participation. So ready? I like to see, you know what I like to see in the chat box? When it says multiple attendees are typing. So Liz says the hospitals. Correct. Where else? Where else are recovery coaches hired? Behavioral health treatment centers, hospitals, outpatient clinics, behavioral health agencies. So when you talk about, Marianne, when you talk about a behavioral health agency, is that like an addiction treatment, mental health treatment, both, anything specific? Hospitals and RCO, RCO is short for Recovery Community Organization. Marianne said it all. Sean talks about methadone clinics. Donald talks about ERs, the RCO. Again, I believe you're saying when you say RCO, it's a Recovery Community Organization, correct? MAT programs, medication-assisted treatment, and in methadone clinics. We mainly use them in our OP, outpatient or re-entry settings, programs. Recovery centers, like recovery community centers. Very good. So those are where a lot of the recovery coaches are hired in a family workshop. So thank you for that. That's exactly what I was looking for. I don't know that I can add any other places, but I think that's exactly, those are all relevant. Those are the places where recovery, oh, thank you, Juan. That's another one. Recovery houses. These are all places where recovery coaches are currently being hired. And these are some of the lists that we had generally. You got all these. I don't think anybody talked about courts, but sometimes they're in courts. addiction treatment providers, hospitals, courts, places where the recovery coach is hired. Now, let's just be clear, too. And here again, here's another test. So, where I want to see multiple attendees typing is in 10 words or less, how would you describe the role of a recovery coach? What is it they do? What do recovery coaches do? And see if you can, it's like explaining it to your 8-year-old child, your 10-year-old child in a few short words. What is it they do? What do recovery coaches do? Inspire and advocate. Wow. That's pretty, I like that. That is simple, Sean, and beautiful. Thank you. Inspire and advocate. Helping clients move from point A, where they are now, to point B, where they want to be. Hey, I've heard that before. That's pretty good, Marianne. Love it. Support individuals in their transition process of active addiction to active recovery. So I think in some roles it's that, but the way we've come to know recovery coaches is really to work on maintaining and sustaining recovery. If we're talking about moving from active addiction to active recovery, to me, that's a little more the role of a clinician. And so, but I know that some places they do that for the role of recovery coach. Thank you, Charlene. Terry Woodruff says, provide hope, of course, engagement, support, advocacy, friend, teach, encourage, clarify, motivate, inform, save lives, share their strength and hope, being the evidence that recovery is possible. Yes, very good. These are all good. So I just want to kind of all get on the same wavelength. I often see as addiction, one of the major symptoms of addiction is isolation. And so one of the major indicators of recovery to me is connection. And oftentimes, recovery coaches are the first meaningful connection for the person in recovery, and then they help the person connect to others so that recovery capital is built and the recovery connection is strengthened. So what about these ideas of where we had just described that remove obstacles, give community resources, yeah, all that, help, perfect, transport to groups. Thank you, Francis. And coaches often end up isolated. They often end up, when they're put into, say, a hospital setting or even a behavioral health setting or a court, that they are the only one with that role, and they're surrounded oftentimes by people that have very differing roles. And Juan says, so true. And so when you're on this island, what do you see some of the difficulties that if we just drop a coach isolated, alone, as part of, say, a treatment team in a behavioral health setting or as part of an emergency department, what are some of the difficulties? And so again, these are questions for you that I'm just looking forward to seeing your chat box responses down there. So I'd like to see multiple attendees typing. What are some of the difficulties with the coach on an island approach? No network. You got it, Juan. Yeah. No accountability, right? They lose focus. These are all great. And that guy has no food, but he has his phone standing out there on the island. Well, I mean, hopefully is that a phone or maybe it's a book? I don't know. Compassion fatigue. Major disconnect, right? Yeah. There's a lot of difficulties. They're just isolated. Yeah. There you go. Lack of understanding of the role. Judging by appearance that a coach is not professional. Wow. Thanks, Barbara. It's hard being in the middle of corporations and people's needs for treatment, stranded with no support. Francis says, sad. It is sad. But even in Connecticut, where we're very progressive, we have this happen at times. And oftentimes, though, I think the coaches are fortunate because they have other coaches at CCAR and across the state to talk to. Stigmatization, true. So let's see what's coming up next here. Here are some of the ideas that I processed a blog probably earlier this year on this very topic, but I wanted to just run this live and get your guys' input on some of the factors that we have discovered in Connecticut about putting an isolated coach out there. So the coach only knows what the coach knows. And that's not any criticism or correction of the coach. A person, if they drop me onto an emergency department, I would have my network of connections. I would have my understanding of recovery. I would have my understanding of the next steps. And that often won't be enough. I mean, I feel kind of inadequate oftentimes. I'm the only connection to the recovery community. However, that recovery community is defined by me. So I might have a very strong connection to Alcoholics Anonymous, let's say, and less of a connection to Smart Recovery or Celebrate Recovery, but I might know how to get there. But I might not be based at all in anything like yoga or something like that. And so it's my connection when it's just one coach on the island. And so because of that, you guys are talking about it, because the coach only knows what the coach knows, only one connection to the recovery community, mine, that my role as resource broker, which is one of the roles of a recovery coach, is limited. So I don't have as much, I don't have as many resources available, just the ones I know. So it's always going to be limited. Any thoughts on that whatsoever? Does this make sense so far? I say that would be a yes. So good. There's limited or no support from other recovery coaches. So if it's just the person in, say, an emergency department, it's just that person. So no one else is in the role. Do you think there might be some supervision challenges, say if you have a supervisor that doesn't understand the role supervising a recovery coach? Anybody have any, what are some of the difficulties or challenges that might happen? Again, that's a question for you guys. What do you think some of the difficulties might be? That's right. Asking the coach to do things outside their lane. Thanks, Terry. How are you? Lack of education. I am the guinea pig at my program. Oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You laugh, so I hope you see the humor in that. True. Misinformation and perceptions, right? A lot of other people are typing too. So there are supervision challenges. I think one of the examples I often use is, let's just go to a clinical setting, and you guys talked already about staying in your lane, true? So, yeah, perhaps I might not be right for that recovery, so there's no choice for the recovery. Francis, that's a great point. So one of the supervision challenges is, let's say I'm a clinically trained supervisor, and I'm supervising a recovery coach, right? That clinically trained, I've been taught that if my counselor is in recovery and goes to a 12-step meeting for their own recovery and sees and I quote, client at that 12-step meeting, oftentimes that clinician has been trained or instructed to leave the 12-step program, or certainly not engage with the client, and probably advised not to share anything personal. And think of the vast difference, the difference in perspective of being a recovery coach, where if you were a recovery coach, you went to that same 12-step meeting for your own recovery, let's say, and you saw a recovery you had worked with. uh, Ideally, the recovery coach would probably embrace that person, sit down next to them, and share the meeting together. It's a different lens, it's a different approach, and I think that provides a challenge for a lot of people. And our program is the Recovery Coach Learning Program. Good. And so there's also employment eligibility restrictions on a lot of these islands. So a lot of things like anybody know a recovery coach that might have a criminal record? And if you work in a big corporation or one of these island type facilities, you might not be allowed to work there. You might be required to have a certain amount of clean time. And as you know, I don't necessarily agree that clean time is a requirement for um, employment or eligibility for employment. As a matter of fact, my training and my learning at 20 years at CCAR suggests that we can't even ask if a person is in recovery. So that's not legal to do, but people do it all the time, don't they? There's also, I feel recovery coaches, when we're talking about the hired into this type of environment, I think here's a picture that I came up with. This is their environment. Anybody see any? What would it be like to be hired as a recovery coach and dropped into this castle on the hill? What do you think that feels like? And give me some feeling words. What would that feel like to you? Lost. You're not lost, Francis. You're sitting up there on top of the mountain in your big castle. I'm just teasing. Scary. Yeah, especially at night, right? It's a little bit like Hogwarts, but maybe not. Um, Lots of people are typing, so I'll kind of see what else people have to say. Isolated. So, yeah, so we're even more isolated, disconnected, overwhelming, royalty for the peasant. Well, yeah. Do you think I'm far off base thinking that sometimes when we have these big treatment providers, that people go in there, right? They might go up into the, I can't find the bathroom. That's pretty good. I like that. People, so think about when someone goes away to treatment, right? Oftentimes they have these big places that are uh, purposely isolated, that they're away from society, they're away from all the hustle and bustle, so people can go there and what? Initiate their recovery, wouldn't you say? So you could go to this castle retreat, right? And they could have an incredibly wonderful program where recovery is initiated. Now, if the recovery coach, they say, here's a big treatment system, let's put a recovery coach in here because it's what people are saying are cool. What does the recovery coach do in this type of setting? So that's just the analogy I'm drawing. So follow me a little bit here. And I asked you, what are your thoughts about coaching recovery in a fortress? What are they? Could you do it? Sure. I can repeat that. So it's on the screen. So what are your thoughts about coaching recovery in a fortress? And when I say fortress, what are your thoughts about going to a place that's very insulated, isolated, being dropped in there. What are your thoughts about coaching recovery in a place like that? Yeah, with an action plan possible. Are you, and it depends if you're allowed out of that place, right? If you could maybe walk the person out somewhere to their next, wherever they're going to live or whatever. I like that, Marianne. It's not where you are, it is who you are with. Protected but not real, confined, limited, put in a box, adapt to the environment. We coach in the jails, yeah. So coaching in the jails is type of an isolated event. Is it with people that are there for life, or will they be getting out and maintaining contact with their coach? So those are all the types of questions. Some people are lifers and can be coached, have recovery coached to them. Yeah, you might be one of the few bringing in the sunlight of the spirit. You sure might be. Yep. I think that's why they do it, Brian. That's a great point. There's not much for distractions in a place like that, is there? No, I agree. And I think that's why a lot of them are set up that way. It's a time for that initial powerful healing, that place where recovery begins. And I would say that the recovery coach role is always it times where you would initiate recovery, but mostly recovery coaches are there to help maintain and sustain recovery. So let's see what's coming up next here. So when you have those big places, there's certainly stability there. There's certainly security in a lot of ways. And a lot of our big providers have incredible security just to get in the place, right? Some have metal detectors and all that, and all kinds of guards and everything. So there's stability, security. Some people might translate that into safety, and some people might translate that into being unsafe environment with all those walls and security and stability and safety. There's a lot of rules usually to living in a fortress or being in the fortress, and there are some restrictions, right? Anything else that you guys can think of that would be for living in that type of environment or working? Good. So let's take a look at the next one, which is, do you think there's a better approach than this? And this is quite the island fortress in this picture, don't you think? Is there a better approach than this? And I would say probably yes when it comes to recovery coaching. I'm not here to argue about or debate what's the best setting for treatment, for initiating recovery. This type of island fortress very well could be a very powerful place and a perfectly appropriate place to begin someone's recovery. But again, I would leave that up to the person. I believe the best way to deploy recovery coaches is through a recovery community organization. And you guys had mentioned that earlier. This is an organization by and for people in recovery. And we say the recovery community is made up of people in recovery, family members, friends, and allies. And I wonder if it's now time to introduce this idea of an RCCO. RCCO, a recovery community and coaching organization. So not only do we bring in all aspects of the recovery community, all pathways of recovery, but our focus is on the recovery community and coaching the others. It's just food for thought. So why do I think a recovery community organization is the best way to deploy recovery coaches? What would that look like? let's take a look at a few of the factors. So every state, I believe, needs at least one vibrant recovery community and coaching organization. At least one. Um, I have had many talks with other leaders in the field. We go back and forth. There are some people, my colleagues, that I love and trust and respect dearly, that believe every state should have multiple recovery community organizations. I understand that we are in Connecticut and have a very small state, so I think one recovery community organization works better. It's better to have a single voice at the state level to oversee all recovery support services in a very similar, um, replicable manner so that we're doing things the same way. It's not assures quality, but that's for you to wrestle with. And I don't know what it's like in your state. First of all, answer me this question. Does your state where you're in now, there's about 15 people on the call, do you have a recovery community organization or organizations? Yes or no? And how many do you have that you know of in your state where you are right now? Sean says, no, there is not one. Well, there's an opportunity for you, Sean. Yeah, we have multiple here in New Jersey. Yeah, yes, three. Yes, in Raleigh. So that would that be one, yes. We are trying to start a peer support association. That's the only one I know of in Arizona. Wow. Okay, thank you, Marianne. Yes, 3 to 4. Arkansas. Oh yeah, AR. AZ is Arizona, right? All right. Okay, it's late in the month. Forgive me. So that's just, and the other idea is then what is the opportunity for you to talk about recovery community organizations? And so here's a few points that will give you some talking points anyway. The participants would have access to all the fortresses. So if the recovery community organization is kind of like the fluid, if you will, between all organizations, that we can flow and go anywhere. So if somebody is dropped into our water, let's say, then we have the ability to get them in a boat and take them to whichever resource they really know about and appreciate, or maybe don't know about but are willing to try. But we have all those, we have access to all those different places because we are kind of the water between all the fortresses. I know I'm getting a little weird, so if I get a little weird and off track, let me know. But I kind of think in pictures, so I try to do my best to convey those pictures. The Recovery Coaching and Community Organization develops a team of highly skilled, competent, well-paid professional recovery coaches. And I'm talking, this is the ideal because can we always do this? But this is the goal, right? And after, in next month, I'll be at CCAR for 20 years, and it took us like 17 years to get to the point where we were even offered a chance to develop a team of highly skilled, competent, well-paid professional recovery coaches. And so I want you to keep the idea on team. And I also want to think about this idea, just to put a seed in your head about the idea of well paid. So there's many places that want to pay for coaches on call or pay them by how many times they see. No, our coaches have shifts during the week, full time, paid well, benefits, vacation, all of that. And I think if a recovery community and coaching organization doesn't treat their people well, their people in recovery well, that represent the recovery community well, then who will? The recovery, and this is the model of how we're seeing that it works really, really well. The recovery community and coaching organization dispatches So we have this team sitting around in the fire station, cooking an amazing spaghetti dinner, and the alarm bell goes off, which is really a call from AnswerMed or whatever, and it's time for the coaches to go out. So they can be dispatched. Right now, we have a team of 14 coaches going to emergency departments primarily. We're still working on getting them dispatched to all those other places: police stations, fire stations, prisons, treatment centers, managed care organizations, wherever, whenever requested. So it's a dispatch model. And right now, for the emergency department, we're covering 8 in the morning to 12 midnight, 7 days a week, including holidays. And a lot of people want to know, well, why don't you cover 12 to 8? Well, there's some funding issues, and we want to keep shifts manageable and all that. But oftentimes, our reputation is built that when people come in at 2, 3, 4 in the morning and are wildly intoxicated or whatever, doctors are now often willing to hold them till our 8 o'clock shift starts, and we can see someone right away. So, and have you ever tried to talk to a really drunk person? How does that work? Does that work well for you? So you want to maybe get a little coherent when that window opens that they're thinking they might need help. You want to be available. Boom, let's send them away let's work with them to see what they want to do for the next phase of their recovery. So I will have time for questions. And again, if you have any questions while you're listening to this or responses, I encourage you to just put them in the chat box right down there at the bottom. And then the recovery coaching and community organization practices a key coaching principle. It treats each coach as a resource, giving them the freedom to innovate, adapt, and serve. Leadership of this team does not micromanage. And oftentimes we see that in different places. So the coach, as trained recovery coaches and being trained in the field, that we teach recovery coaches to treat the recoverees as a resource. Not an object, not a recipient, but a resource. Remember that from the Recovery Coach Academy. Good question, Terry. I'll get to it. We treat the Recovery Coach Academy to treat all the people we serve as resources. As administrators of the program, if we believe in that principle, we need to treat our coaches as resources. And I'll ask you a very simple question. Do you trust the people that work for you and under you? Do you treat them as resources? And this has been a long lesson for me over 20 years of being at CCAR, to understand that my role as a leader is to lift up and elevate other leaders. And the only way that I can do that is to give them opportunities to serve, to grow, to thrive, and to lead themselves, to lead others. And so I can't micromanage that. And I certainly have to trust the people that work with me to do that. So Terry's question is, what do coaches do while waiting for requests? So hopefully they have that time. So we kind of got to the point now in 14 hospitals that they're pretty busy. But however, our coaches also do telephone recovery support, especially the people that they've worked with in the emergency department. So they have people that they can call, and they're required to call them once a day for 10 days. Our contract says a minimum of 6 times in the next 10 days, but they try to call everybody every day they're on, so once a day every 10 days. If they have all that done, then there's always some administrative paperwork to do, like catching up on their reports, their expenses, their mileage, all of that. And then finally, if all of that, there's other trainings they can attend and go to. But we also have a recovery community centers where they do not sit at home waiting to do this stuff. They actually go into the recovery community centers and help out there too as well. That doesn't happen all that often, but that's kind of like the last leg. But I would say, if you talk to all our coaches, they're all very, very busy and filling up their time. Are we good so far? Nod your head if we're good. Thank you for nodding your head. I see you out there. No, I can't see you. I'm just kidding. But I trust the process. So the recovery coaching and community organization allows the recovery coach team to grow dynamically or organically and strengthen one another. So this is the idea that the team learns from one another. We're so it's kind of like in any team. If you're like coaching a team, you want that. They call it in sports, like some teams have tremendous chemistry, right? That they just know where one person is going to move to, know which person can do what, and they just start to learn from one another. We see in this in our emergency department recovery coach teams that there's one person who is the insurance wizard, so they all call Katie, or there's another one who's the resource wizard, and they might give Regina a call. So yeah, and so they do once a month supervision, all of that. So allow the team, give the team room to breathe, learn to grow, learn to address challenges amongst themselves, and pretty soon you'll be amazed at what happens, right? We really believe in the teamwork, and teamwork makes the dream work. You've heard that. We learn from one another. The body of knowledge is a powerful living entity nurtured by the team. And so think of this. One way that they stay in touch with each other is there are two ways. It's simple, but it's beautiful, is that the people that are on call, and you can opt to be on it or even if you're not on call or on shift that day, is a group text message, right? A group chat. I mean, that's pretty simple. So they're always aware of where everyone is going, what they're doing, what each other is about, who they're dealing with, and they just keep in touch that way. The other way is I talked a lot about the resource broker. It's hard to be when you're in that fortress to be able to broker resources. One way they do that is they have an Excel spreadsheet. And it's not your typical Excel spreadsheet. It has actual like names of people, and like if you have a detox intake person that is very friendly to the coaches, then they will have that person's like cell phone number, and maybe you don't want to give that out in a document that everyone can access or a public document. And so they start to build relationships with a lot of providers, and as that grows, they keep track of it. And sometimes even in the same provider, it depends on who's on shift if they're going to be able to get somebody in or not. Isn't that? And I'm sure that's not a surprise to a lot of you, but that we found that to be true. And so this is always growing and shifting. You print it out, one number changes, the list isn't as powerful as it was. So you always have to keep something digital that can be updated frequently. And I talked about how it develops linkages with all types of community recovery support. So often we talk about, the addiction treatment piece, maybe the mental health piece, but we know, like, what about infant clothing or men's clothing or dental work or, there are so many job support. Of course, we have the safe and sober housing places and all of that. So it's always growing through this Excel spreadsheet. And I like this that the Recovery Coaching Community Organization will develop a career ladder for those interested. And look at the process that we have built and maybe discovered over the course of many years. And so I think this is important as well. That oftentimes people come in, from receiving support to volunteering, which is offering support, right? So they come in and they're looking for services, and we, instead of asking for a hand, instead of it, one volunteer said it this way. So let me get back. One volunteer said, "When I came to CCAR, you were looking for a hand up instead of giving me a hand out." And so we encourage people to volunteer. So they come in looking for support, and then oftentimes they get into volunteering. And then as the more they volunteer, the more they become qualified to partake in we believe, quality recovery coach training, to earning a recovery coach professional designation through our program. That's kind of the carrot, that once they get that recovery coach professional designation, that oftentimes they're now eligible for employment in the recovery support services field. So we have our team of paid coaches here. We have a team of volunteer coaches as well, but we also have many people that have come through our system that are working in those castles out all throughout Connecticut and actually around this region, and they stay in touch with us. So it's a little better, but they do talk about the isolation and being out there on their own in those castles, if you will. So that's our career ladder: receiving services, volunteering, getting trained, employed. And now we were even able to get one person in our staff that oversees this entire career ladder. And we're excited about it because we're seeing people actually go through this process and become one of our emergency department recovery coaches. So take a look at this. Our coaches, they have the ability. I couldn't find the water kind of picture I wanted to describe. But before I go back, let me go one more thing. And this is this idea of coacher vision. And so Stacy and I and our team have put together a 2-day curriculum that's going to debut in January. We're going to pilot it. And it's really about coaches coaching coaches. And how do you apply those coaching principles into your oversight or management or supervision, if you will, of a recovery coach? So we're looking forward to that. And a lot of the qualities that or the skills and tasks and art of coaching recovery apply to coaching recovery coaches. And we want to get away from the supervision piece, because to me, and I think most of our team agrees, that that's still a very clinical behavioral health treatment oriented term. So we didn't come up with coacher vision. Actually, the coaches did. Yeah, you're not supervising me, you're coachervising me. So we might even have a role developed for a coacher advisor. And so I just wanted to kind of let you noodle on that for a little bit. So here are my guys in parachutes. Our team is in parachutes, and they're probably parachuting alongside. They're jumping out of that big high castle. I don't know. I just made that up. But a big high castle. They got their recoveries next to them, and they're all going to the place where they need to. I want to go live in that villa over there, or whatever it may be. So I want to go to that meeting down the road over there. And so, what is the point of this? What are the benefits? What are the benefits that you see of having coaches deployed in the model I just described, where they have the flexibility, they're the water, they connect people? Talk to me. I don't know if anyone's out there. No one's typed in a while. So, what are some of the benefits of the model I just described, or do you have any questions about it? Or I'm looking for your comments. They can soar to great heights. That's the idea, isn't it? It's more about this idea of seeing the people you help soar. A better opportunity to meet clients' needs. You have a lot more opportunity. I agree. I just had an experience with my son who left the basketball team and joined the swim team. And he loves basketball. But I really was thinking of what I observed over the last 3 years. And the most successful coaches are more focused on player development than winning. And I think that's really true about recovery coaching. Because I don't know that we ever really win anything or win the game, whatever the game may be when it comes to recovery. But what we really are, and what I'm really enthusiastic about, is seeing people develop. And I think that's what you talked about, Juan. They could soar to great heights. Because right now I have a kite and you don't have an umbrella. Very good. Holy cow, that was a good one. Uh, Choices and pairing connections. My RCO is working this direction now. Wonderful. That's all. That's good news. And so it's really about um, trust, accountability, dependability. Yes. So you know how often here's a big vision piece for you that I've talked about lately too, is this idea um, that the recovery community and what we do as recovery coaching, we often respond to the system, right? That we're going to find the dollars and we're going to respond to what the system offers. And I'm starting to believe, and I do believe this now, that if we do our work well, which we have a history of doing over many, many, many decades, back, that we know people in recovery, family members, friends, and allies, we know this better than anyone. Why isn't the system responding to us? Because we have 23 million Americans in recovery, never mind all the family members on top of that. Why doesn't the system respond to us? Because I think we have some seriously good answers to the addiction crisis. So here are some of the benefits that a newer dimension to picture. Yeah, and then we have a few things. So if a recovery coach is truly working through a recovery coaching community organization, wouldn't you agree that they would have a lot more access and exposure and knowledge and maybe even experience to multiple pathways of recovery? That they would know where the smart recovery meeting is, maybe where that gym over there is run by a person in recovery, and there's a lot of recovery people in it. There's a recovery club that's doing hiking. Um, However, if you're in that big fortress, you would only have that pathway that fortress is primarily promoting, correct? Makes sense? And then the coacher vision model is really about coaches coaching coaches, that we all get stronger, we all get better. And that's what this model offers, that opportunity for us as well. That there's continuous recovery support. So we don't discharge anyone from our program. So oftentimes when you're in the fortress, you get discharged, right? And you're given a program, 90 meetings in 90 days. And maybe what's a recovery coach? Is the recovery coach still available to the person once the person gets discharged? Well, in our model, the Recovery Coaching and Community Organization, there is no discharge. There is no time when you let people go. You say, no, we're done with you. No, you can, we're done with you when you say we're done with you. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. And if they want to continue to be involved and give back and be of service, however form that might take, of course we're open to that. And I can't stress enough this idea of team. That one of my favorite days of the month is exactly that. Long-term recovery has no discharge. So why would we have any discharge? And I love this concept of team, that this idea that the first Tuesday of the month is our full staff meeting, and we've nearly doubled in a year and a half or so, and or more than doubled. We're up to 32 people, and I cannot tell you how rewarding it is to be a part of this team, because we're all people of like mind that are out there to care, connect others, to serve, to just promote recovery wherever we can. And it's a tremendous, tremendous blessing to be part of a team. There is no I in team, as corny as that says. When you think of that coach on the island, there is no team out there. It's just the coach. And so my encouragement to you as advocates is, how do you promote the Recovery Community Organization concept in your area? And what can you do to champion that cause? And what can you do to help see this model come to fruition? I'm also incredibly passionate about this subject and would love to help any of you with any thoughts, ideas, share our experience, strength, and hope in any way we can. So I've talked about some of the ways that we have seen. Do you see any other benefits or any other ideas? Do you have any other questions or anything about what I've talked about, or comments that you'd like to share with the group? If so, please put it in the chat box on the bottom. You know how much I love to see multiple attendees typing. Have I said that enough time? Hey, MAT doesn't stand for medication assisted treatment. It stands for multiple attendees typing. And there's no one typing right now. But I guess that's okay. Oh, thank you. Somebody's typing. There's a few. Thank you. You didn't want to make me feel isolated and alone.
Alone on your island.
Yeah, alone on my island. So this is a part we're talking about questions, comments, feedback, epiphanies, opinions, and any other learnings.
Oh, there you go.
MAT, all right. Yeah. Uh-oh. What was that? I right-clicked. Oh, see what I did there? So we have a lot of people typing, so this is good. So I'm glad you're typing. Any suggestions for funding? Well, so the first suggestion is I'd have to talk. Yes, there's many suggestions for funding, but it's would have to do a lot with your current situations, Barbara. Like, and, and so anything from training dollars to charging for the service. If I am, Stacey, how do I get the chat box expanded so I can see the whole thing?
Oh, sure.
They went up. It went up high.
Hold on, I can do that. Like that?
Yes. Part of an RCO, and I am the only recovery coach working in my agency. So, Courtney, you're part of a recovery community organization. Are there other people that have been trained as a recovery coach in your RCO? So, my first suggestion might be get everybody in your RCO trained. So, every position in CCAR, our RCO, Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, goes through the Recovery Coach Academy training and can take all the others if they like. Yeah, and good to. I agree. Bounce ideas off of each other. Am not I am not part of an OCO. Oh, if you are not part of an RCO, yeah, yeah. So you are on an island. Is that what you're saying, Courtney? I gotcha. So I'm interested in what the group might say because there's other people that are working on an island out there. So what would your advice be to Courtney? She's the only recovery coach, and she's in one of those fortresses. What would you say to her? Major function of management is planning and replanning. Hopefully in a positive way, right? Medicaid is one possibility. I'm not really beholden to the recovery coach service billing for that service. It's a ton of administrative work, and I think it's a very difficult type of thing to keep people in that box of like 15-minute slots or half-hour slots or hour slots. And I I think I think the greatest untapped resource for funding our recovery coach work is the recovery community itself. A lot of work to be done on the ground floor. An insightful webinar with giving some clarity on how recovery coaches can best be utilized. Thanks, Sean. Our Brothers in Recovery weekly support meeting as a topic. We'll discuss multiple pathways as most are from 12-step programs and are tainted. Okay, I hear you, Reggie. What is the consensus on how to utilize coaches using marijuana? So, Charlene, that's like a whole nother webinar, isn't it? So that's a big question. And, I think the only way you can do it is as prescribed. Is it as prescribed? And like any other thing, it really has to be based on job performance. So I always go to, you can't really, a lot of people think that if you had someone in recovery, they went out and drank on the weekends, that you can fire them. Well, you can't because they haven't done anything illegal. It hasn't affected their job unless, if somehow their recovery status was built into their credibility. But even that's a stretch. So that's a huge question as well. But it's a great question. But I would say you've got to go back to job performance, and if you need coaches using marijuana as part of the job, then every situation is going to be different. Funding often changes the work. Exactly. And in the nonprofit world, Barbara, that's known as what? Mission drift, right? So do you have a board of directors that understands mission drift, and are they willing to help support you and find other solutions so you can continue the work without drifting too far off your mission? Find coaches that might be near you. We are not an RCO, but have many coaches that we connect with across the state. So Terry, that's a great answer for Courtney. This idea that, Courtney, do you know of any other coaches, period, that are working in your area that you might be able to reach out to, might be able even to start a little private Facebook group or something like that, or group text or group messaging or something like that? That's a great idea, Terry. Thank you. Yeah, Charlene, it is a good question. I have a feeling that Charlene is a lot like me. She's a pot stirrer. She likes to stir the pot. For Courtney, find an RCCO and get on board to be able to help to your best capacities. Right? Yeah. And see if there is one nearby and ask them for support. So actually, the hour is drawn to a close. I mean, you guys might have been the best webinar participation class ever. I think you are probably the best class ever. Here's some of my information. That Coaching Recovery 923 ccar.us/blog. The initial blog I wrote on No Coaches in an Island and many other topics on Coaching Recovery 923 is up there. We're open to guest writers too. Just send me an email there. And thank you all very much for your time and your participation. Thank you for all those experiences with Matt, multiple attendees typing. I genuinely appreciate that too. And I hope you all have a very, very wonderful holiday season. And in all times and in all places, continue the good work that you do.